Welcome to Spotlight Santa Monica. I'm Sandy Jacobson. Today we're talking about the city's infrastructure, finding affordable housing in Santa Monica, and one of the city's most treasured places, Virginia Avenue Park. It takes a lot of work to keep our city running smoothly and safely. Joining me now is City Engineer Lee Swain. Lee, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So what does a city engineer do?
Well, the city engineer in Santa Monica has a lot of interesting work, but my primary responsibility is to ensure that all types of public infrastructure are built to city standards and that they are constructed in a safe manner for the long-term benefit of our residents. An example is the Expo Light Rail project. That's basically a project that's done by another entity, but that project is a major public works infrastructure in the city of Santa Monica, and so they need to abide by our city standards. They submit plans for review. Our office reviews those plans to make sure that they meet our standards, and then they construct it, and they need to construct it in conformance with those approved plans. So really what we do on small projects or large is make sure that the infrastructure is of a certain standard and quality in Santa Monica, and it'll be to the benefit of our community long term.
Aside from the light rail, what else counts as city infrastructure?
Infrastructure is all types. If you travel around the city, you'll see it virtually everywhere. For instance, in the transportation area, you've got streets, sidewalks, bridges, alleys. You have traffic signals and signs and pavement markings. We just redid about 350 new crosswalks around about 100 different intersections, for instance. It also involves bikes or bike infrastructure. For instance, bike racks. We installed about 500 of them in the last couple of years. We've got bike lanes going in throughout the community. It's major public facilities like City Hall, fire department
So
facilities.
buildings as well count as infrastructure?
A lot of buildings in Santa Monica. We're fortunate to have the Annenberg Beach House, which is unique to our city. The pier is unique, but all types of public facilities like libraries. But there's also a lot of infrastructure that you don't see regularly, and that involves our primary utilities like water, sewer, and storm drains. So storm drains, all those utilities are normally underground. They're very important for a city, but you don't normally see them because when it rains, the water tends to get collected by these storm drains, and it's, hopefully percolated into the groundwater, or it's put to a beneficial use. Sewers, for instance, when you flush your toilet or take a shower, that water needs to go someplace and be treated. So it's treated through a collection, or it's collected in a system of sewers, and it's treated at a treatment plant down in Hyperion.
How many people do you have working for you? This is an enormous undertaking.
Well, there's about 30 people in our division, but there's a lot of city departments that are involved in all city projects, but it takes a lot of work from a number of different departments to plan.
I never realized how much is involved here. What are some of the most memorable projects you've worked on?
I've had the fortune over the last few years in Santa Monica to work on some great public infrastructure projects. One that comes to mind is the water treatment facility and the Sharnock Wellfield Restoration Project. In the mid-1990s, Santa Monica lost the use of our wells in that Sharnock ground basin because of pollution. And so this treatment plant that's on the corner of Bundy and Wilshire, it's actually outside our city, but we own that property. It was significantly enhanced to a state-of-the-art water treatment facility that basically cleaned that water that we were now able to pump, and we're now able to produce most of the water that we need to supply this city, as opposed to having to purchase it from another entity that typically would bring it from outside the region.
So that Bundy Wilshire development, that's strictly for Santa Monica?
It's a treatment plant that the city has owned for many years, and most people don't realize it's there. Most people don't realize we have water rights in the Charnock area, which is also outside the city, but that infrastructure, as well as significant 25 million gallon water reservoir, which is underneath the LA Riviera Country Club. That's all Santa Monica owned facilities that benefit us every day in providing clean water, and most residents are very surprised to even hear about it.
If residences or businesses want to work on their property, do they have to go through your department, and where do you start with something like that?
Yeah, they would simply, if they're starting a project and they've never done it before, they come into City Hall, they take a right, go down the hall to the public counter. We have public works staff at that counter. We also have building and safety and planning staff. So they would just simply meet with the receptionist, let the receptionist know what they would like to have done, and they'll direct them to the person that will be the most helpful, and that often involves our department. We also have the ability through a new software to be able to accept plans for plan check online.
Oh, cool.
So once you get started in the process, if you have to go through a plan review process, you no longer have to drive down to City Hall. You can submit those plans online, which is very convenient for the person that's developing
And
those
a lot
plans.
less frustrating than waiting in a long line.
Exactly.
So is that what you call K-Bug?
Well, KBUG is a loose acronym for Know Before You Go. It's a public outreach tool that the city uses, and it's published online on our city website, and it's also published weekly in the paper. But basically that particular tool allows people to know what's coming up in the next week or two, so that if they need to modify their route to school or work, they can do that and be less frustrated if there's a lane closure, for instance.
That it's less about building than it is about moving around the city.
Right, it's more about giving people a heads up on things that are coming up in the near term. We also have other public outreach tools. One is Be Excited, Be Prepared, which if you go to the city's website at smgov.net and you look at the icon that says Be Excited, Be Prepared in the lower right-hand corner of that homepage, you can click on that and you can get a lot of information about the projects that I'm talking about.
What are the current projects that you have in the works besides the light rail?
Right now we've got some really interesting projects. I mentioned light rail. Light rail is just a game changer for the city of Santa Monica. Many years ago, 50 years or so ago, there was a light rail line that served the city, but we haven't seen it for a long time. With that light rail line, we will now be well connected with downtown LA and some of the other communities in between, like Culver City. And they're actually building a $1.5 billion extension, the second phase from downtown, from Culver City to Santa Monica. That was as a result of a parcel tax, or I'm sorry, a half-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters as part of Measure R in 2008. So Santa Monica will get 3 wonderful new transit stations, or Expo Light Rail stations. And so virtually anybody in the community can find their way either walking, biking, or even driving to one of our great stations, and they can do all kinds of fun things in other communities, and others outside of our community can work and take light rail or bike, for instance.
And stay off the streets.
Yeah. Speaking of interesting projects, the Expo Bike Trail is also coming to Santa Monica. It's along the same alignment as the Expo Light Rail line, and that will be another great amenity for people to get to and from work.
Thank you so much, Lee. This has been very interesting. For more on our city's infrastructure, visit smgov.net/publicworks and click on Civil Engineering. Up next, affordable housing in Santa Monica? It exists. Details next.